We made her up. That's the part I need to say first, because when this started, there was no ghost story. No old legend, no dead girl under the school, no teacher warning us about something waiting in the dark. There was just a hallway in the basement that nobody used. And because my friends and I wanted to keep it for ourselves, we made people afraid of it. We called her the Maiden. At first, she was only a name, a rumor we attached to a place that already felt wrong. This happened when I was in high school in an old but mostly normal building. The basement was different. We had classes down there sometimes, and once you went down the stairs, it always felt like the same time of day. There were no windows there, just those fluorescent lights that buzzed, flickered, or did not work at all. Now there was this one big classroom in the middle of the basement hallway, and past it, the corridor kept going into a darker section everyone avoided. At the far end, broken furniture was piled everywhere. Tables, chairs, benches, metal frames, all stacked together like the school had been dumping things there for years. From a distance, it looked like a dead end. Teachers were telling us not to go there because it was dangerous. The sharp edges, loose nails, no proper light. They were probably right, but when you're in high school, being told not to go somewhere just makes you want to know what's there. So one day after class, when most people had gone upstairs, 4 of us finally checked it out. We turned on our phone flashlights and walked towards the pile. Up close, it looked worse than it did from the classroom. We had to squeeze through sideways, past splintered wood, rusted screws, and tables that looked ready to collapse. Every scrape echoed through the basement. The classroom behind us was empty, the stairs felt very far away, and ahead of us, dust moved through our flashlights. Now we expected to find the wall behind the furniture, but instead, we found a corner. The hallway turned sharply left. The dead end was actually not a dead end at all. Around that corner was another hallway, longer than our phone lights could reach. On both sides, there were classroom doors. That was what really got to me. It was not a storage closet or a maintenance room. It was an entire abandoned section of the school. Now, we did not go in that first day. Seeing it was enough. But after that, we could not stop thinking about it. By Friday, we went back after school. The building was mostly empty, and schools feel completely different after hours. Every sound stands out. We squeezed through the furniture, turned a corner, and kept walking. The hidden hallway was lined with old classrooms, and the floor was covered in dust thick enough that our footprints stayed behind us. That bothered me right away. If someone else had been there, we would know. The rooms looked like they had been abandoned in the middle of a school year. Nothing happened in them, but they did not feel empty. At the far end of the hallway, we found a heavy metal door. It looked like an old service entrance, with the grey paint rusted near the hinges and scratches around the handle. We tried the handle, and it actually moved. The door was very stiff, but it was not locked. When we pulled it open, daylight came through. It led outside, straight onto a side street. We had just found a secret exit from the school. For a while we used it. Now, not every day, and not enough to make it obvious. But sometimes, if we wanted to leave early or avoid being seen, we went down to the basement, crossed the hidden hallway, and slipped out through the metal door. But the door opened from the outside too, which meant the hallway was not just a way out, it was a way in. That was why we invented the Maiden. We told a few students that the hallway past the broken furniture was not only dangerous because of nails and broken tables. We said there was something else down there. A girl. We did not give her a full backstory. That would have made it sound fake. We just said that sometimes if you stood near the furniture and listened, you could hear crying from the abandoned classrooms. Sometimes it even turned into laughter. And sometimes, if you were lucky enough, you could see her near one of the blackboards, or just dancing by herself in the hallway. We called her the Maiden, and somehow it stuck. At first it was funny. Students dared each other to go near the dark end of the basement. Some claimed they heard something, felt cold, or saw a shape. Then people started adding details we had never told anyone. Someone said the crying sounded muffled, like it was coming through water. Someone else said there were small footprints in the dust. And one person said that if you ever saw the maiden dancing, you had to leave before she stopped. That was the detail that really bothered us. We did say that she was dancing, but we never said anything about what happened if she stopped. After that, the rumor stopped feeling like it belonged to us. A week or two later, one of my friends used the secret exit alone. When he got to the metal door, it was already slightly open. There were footprints in the dust near it. They were smaller than ours, and they came from the outside door and moved towards one of the classrooms. Then they stopped. No footprints leading back. After that, none of us used that hallway alone. The last time we went back, all four of us, we went together. By then, the maiden had spread through the school. Younger students avoided the basement completely. Some people talked about her like the story had existed for years. That bothered me because we knew the truth. There had been no maiden before us. We went after school again once the building had gone quiet. The basement lights buzzed above us, and climbing through the broken furniture felt worse than ever. When we turned the corner, our old footprints were still visible in the dust, but there were other marks too, smaller ones. They moved slowly down the hallway, stopping near classroom doors. They did not look like tracks left by students messing around. One classroom door was open. We remembered that room. We had been inside before. It had just been desks, old papers, and a blackboard. But now, there was a chair in the center of the room. It faced the blackboard. The rest of the room was untouched, but the dust around the chair had been disturbed. On the tray under the blackboard, there was a piece of white chalk. Everything in that room looked old and damp, but the chalk looked clean. When my flashlight moved up the board, I saw the words, written across the center in large, uneven letters. You named me. Nobody screamed. There was no girl in the room, no shadow in the doorway, no footsteps behind us. Complete silence. Just those three words on a blackboard in an abandoned classroom under our school. And that was enough. We ran out of the classroom, down the hidden hallway, through the metal door, and onto the street. It was still daylight outside, cars passed, people walked by, everything was normal, but that made it worse. Because behind that metal door was a dark hallway under our school, and something had answered the story we created. We never used that exit again, not once. But I still think about that door, because maybe the maiden was never a ghost. Maybe someone had found that outside door long before we did. Maybe someone had been using those abandoned classrooms while classes happened, just a few meters away. Maybe they heard us walking through. Maybe they heard us laughing. Maybe they even heard the story we invented to keep people away. And maybe they decided to become her. That explanation should make me feel better, but it doesn't. Because no matter what was down there, one thing still feels true. There was no maiden before us. We gave her the basement, we gave her the classrooms, we gave her the name, and then she wrote back.
This happened about 6 months ago, and I still think about it more often than I want to. I grew up in a small town, somewhere in Western Europe, but my parents always wanted me to have the best education they could give me, so they sent me to a private high school in the capital city. For 4 years, I lived in the student dorm. The city was considered safe. The campus had cameras, but no actual security walking around, because nobody thought there was a reason for it. This happened during my last year of high school. I was 18, so the strict curfew for minors did not really apply for me. Still, the dorm had a tutor who sat in a small office near the entrance and kept an eye on who came in and out. One night, around 11 p.m, I got hungry after a long day of school and decided to walk to McDonald's. It was only about 10 minutes from the dorm, and I had done that walk before. I put on my headphones, played some music, and left without thinking much of it. The restaurant was busier than I expected, but I got my food pretty quickly and started walking back. I should mention that I'm a pretty cautious person when I walk alone at night. I look behind me every now and then, even when nothing feels wrong. The problem is that I also hate walking without music, so my awareness is not always great. Honestly, that habit of checking behind me is probably the reason I got back safely that night. About 3 minutes into my walk, I glanced over my shoulder and noticed a man behind me. He was walking strangely, almost like he was limping. I did not think much of it at first, so I kept walking. A couple of minutes later, I looked back again. The same man was still there, walking the same strange way. This time, when I turned my head, we made eye contact. The second that happened, he stopped behind the corner of a building. Not casually, not like he was turning onto another street, he hid. I'm a big guy, so running isn't exactly my best skill, but I started walking faster. The door was straight ahead, but I didn't want to lead him there. I took a sharp left, ran for a few seconds, then immediately turned right into a side street. I hid behind a corner and looked back. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard footsteps. The man appeared under a streetlight, looking around. That was when I knew for sure he was following me. I waited until he moved further down the street, then started heading toward the dorm again. But I still didn't want him to know where I lived, and I wasn't sure I could make it back to the entrance before he saw me. Instead of going straight inside, I hid behind the pillar of the entrance of an underground parking lot across from the dorm. From there, I could see the street I had come from, and then I saw him running. Not limping anymore, running. He came into view so suddenly that I almost gasped out loud. Somehow, he still didn't see me. He stopped near the parking entrance and started pacing, turning his head from side to side like he knew I was close. Then he spoke. His voice was low but clear. "Where are you?" Then he said, "I just need a little something from you." That was the first time I got a clear look at him because the parking lot lights were on his face. He looked like the most deranged person I had ever seen. He leaned against the brick wall near the entrance, smiling in this disgusting way while searching for me. His mouth was hanging open a little and he was drooling. One finger was curled against his lower lip while he looked around. I don't know how long he stayed there. It was probably not that long, but it felt like hours. Eventually, he walked away, I guess to search somewhere else. I stayed frozen behind that pillar for another couple of minutes. Part of me was convinced he was hiding nearby, waiting for me to come out. But I couldn't stay there forever, so I ran. By some miracle, I made it to the dorm entrance without seeing him again. Of course, with my luck, the tutor was right there, pacing near the entrance. She looked at me immediately and asked if something had happened. Even though I was 18, she could tell I was tense. And I know this sounds stupid now, but I didn't tell her. I was worried she would take it seriously in a way that would affect everyone. Stricter curfew, more rules, maybe even trouble for me. I just wanted to go upstairs, eat my food, and pretend it didn't happen. But I couldn't really do that. I kept looking out of the window of my room, checking the street and the entrance. My roommates noticed, but I told them it was nothing. The rest of the night seemed normal enough. The next day was Saturday, so there was no school. I was planning to spend the day playing video games with my roommates. I went to bed around 2:30 a.m. and fell asleep almost immediately. Then I woke up around 4:30 a.m. At first, I had no idea what woke me. It was warm that night, so I've been sleeping with my window open. For a few seconds, I just lay there, half awake, listening. I got up slowly and peeked through the window. There he was. He was pacing near the campus entrance, looking around like he had been searching for a while. Then he started looking through the ground floor windows. Luckily, I lived on the first floor. I watched him walk up to the glass sliding doors of the dorm entrance. Those doors were supposed to be locked at night. You needed a key card. He stepped in front of them, and for a second I thought he would just stand there. Then the door slid open. I still don't know how. He walked inside. I stayed at the window, hoping I would see him come back out. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard shouting in the hallway outside my room. It was hard to understand, but it sounded like two adults yelling at each other. The noise woke my roommates, and all of us just stared at each other. Then I heard heavy footsteps moving away down the hall. I ran back to the window. The man came out of the dorm and ran across the entrance area. 2 seconds later, the tutor came outside too, talking on the phone. All of us were at the window by then. About 10 minutes later, 2 police cars showed up in front of the dorm. The officer spoke with the tutor, then went inside. After maybe 30 minutes, they left. By then, everyone was awake. My roommates and I went down to the tutor's office, but we were not the only ones. There must have been around 50 students crowded around, all asking questions. The tutor kept it short. She said someone unauthorized had entered the building, but the situation was handled. That was all she would tell us. I never saw that man again. He never came back, at least not that I know of. But after that night, I hated leaving the building after dark. The strangest part is that the dorm turned it into a joke. After a while, whenever someone talked about breaking curfew, people would say, "Careful, the strange man will come and get you." Everyone laughed when they said it. I usually did too, but I still think about that glass door. I think about how it opened when it should have stayed locked. I think about the fact that he found the dorm after I tried so hard not to lead him there. And most of all, I think about what he said while he was looking for me, that he just needed a little something. I still don't know what he wanted, and I hope I never find out.
This is a story about the strangest thing that ever happened to me during high school. It was not something that built up over weeks, a rumor, or a place everyone already thought was creepy. It was one normal school period in the middle of a normal day with almost 30 students in the room. And afterward, the school told us it never happened. This was during my final year of high school. I went to a normal high school in a mid-sized city, the kind of place where most days were boring in a very predictable way. That day our history teacher was absent. At least, that's what we thought. Right before class, a notice appeared in the school app saying she had been called into an urgent parent meeting and that someone would cover the period. That kind of thing happens sometimes, so nobody questioned it. At first, nobody cared. History was the last class before lunch, and most of us were already half checked out. About 10 minutes after the bell, the door opened. A man walked in. None of us recognized him. He was maybe in his 50s, tall and thin, wearing a dark coat even though it was warm outside. He carried a brown leather folder under one arm. The room went quiet. He didn't introduce himself right away. He just stood there at the front, looking at us one by one like he was counting. Then he said, "Your teacher will not be here today." His voice was calm, but there was something off about it. Not scary exactly, it was just a bit too flat. Someone asked if he was our substitute. He smiled a little and said, "For today." That was enough for most people. I mean, he looked like a teacher, walked in through the door, and he seemed to know what class he was in. He opened the leather folder and took out a stack of blank paper. No laptop, no printed worksheet, no attendance form from the office. Just blank paper. He started handing it out row by row. When he reached my desk, he paused for a second, longer than he did with everyone else. Then he said my name. Not in a question, he just said it quietly, like he was confirming something. I remember looking up at him, confused. I thought maybe he read it from a sitting chart, but our history teacher never used one. Before I could say anything, he moved on. When everyone had a sheet of paper, he went back to the front and wrote one sentence on the board. "Where do you feel safest?" At first, a few people laughed because it sounded more like a therapy question than a history assignment. The substitute didn't laugh though. He turned around and said, "Be specific." That made the room quieter. He told us not to write something general like home. He wanted details, the room, the doors, the windows. One girl asked what this had to do with history. He looked at her and said, "Everything has a history." Nobody laughed after that. I don't know why I took the assignment seriously, but I did. Maybe because it was easier to write than to look at him. I wrote about my bedroom. I wrote that it was the only place where I could close the door and feel like nobody expected anything from me. I wrote about my bed that was under the window and that I usually felt safest there late at night. I know, it sounds stupid now, but at the time it was just a weird assignment from a weird substitute. While we wrote, he walked between the desks without making much sound. Every now and then he stopped behind someone and read over their shoulder. Nobody liked that. When he stopped behind me, I froze. I could feel him standing there. Then he leaned down slightly and said, "The window is the weak point." I stopped writing immediately. He moved away before I could react. For the rest of the class, I barely wrote anything. I kept trying to convince myself I had misheard him. When the bell finally rang, everyone stood up at once. The substitute told us to leave the papers on his desk. Most people were happy to get out of there. I put mine on the pile and started walking out with everyone else. Then he said my name again. I turned around. He was standing by the desk with one hand resting on a stack of papers. "Stay a moment," he said. That was when I got really creeped out. I looked around hoping someone else heard him. One of my friends was waiting near the door, and I must have looked panicked because he said, "Come on, we're going to lunch." The substitute looked at him, and for a second nobody moved. Then I just walked out. I didn't ask for permission, I didn't say anything, I just left with my friend. As we walked down the hallway, I did look back once. The substitute was standing in the classroom doorway watching me. Not angry, he was just watching me. At lunch, everyone talked about how weird he was. One girl said he knew her name too. Another student said the substitute wrote something on his paper before collecting it. Someone else said they never heard footsteps when the men walked behind them. That was probably just people scaring themselves. After lunch, we saw our real history teacher in the hallway. She was walking toward the staff room with a coffee in her hand, looking annoyed more than anything. Someone asked her how her parent meeting went. She said there had never been a parent meeting. She did receive a message, supposedly from the office, telling her to go to one of the meeting rooms because a parent was waiting urgently. Before leaving, she did reply asking them to send someone to cover our class, but when she got to the meeting room, nobody was there. She waited almost the whole period before going back to the office. Then she asked us how did it go with the substitute. We started telling her about the man, the blank papers, and the question on the board. She went very quiet. Then she told us to go back to the classroom and wait there. A few minutes later, she came in with someone from the office. They asked us to describe the man, what he said, what he collected, and whether anyone left the room alone with him. That was when it stopped feeling like a weird class and started feeling like something serious. The office told us no substitute was scheduled, no visitor signed in, no one on staff matched the description. They also said no one in the office sent a message about the parent meeting and no one received her request for a cover teacher. The worst part was that the papers were gone. The stack he had collected from us was not on the desk or in the room or even in the office. The school tried to keep quiet about the whole thing. They told us it was probably a misunderstanding, maybe someone from maintenance or an outside contractor who entered the wrong room. But it made no sense. He knew our class, he even knew some of our names. And he asked us where we felt safest. That night I couldn't stop thinking about what I had written. My bedroom, my bed under the window. The window is the weak point. I checked the lock before I went to sleep, and then I checked it again. I closed the curtains all the way. Around 2 a.m. I woke up for no reason. My room was dark, but something felt wrong. For a few seconds I just lay there, listening. Then I heard a soft tapping sound. Not at the door, but at the window. My bedroom was on the second floor, so that should have been impossible. I didn't move. The tapping came back. 3 slow taps, then silence. I never dared to open the curtains. I didn't look outside, I just lay there until morning, staring at the shape of the window in the dark. The next day, I told myself it must have been a branch or the wind. But when I got back to school, there was a folded piece of paper in my locker. No envelope, no name on the outside, just a folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was my assignment from the day before, the one I left on the substitute desk. Across the bottom, in neat red handwriting, someone wrote, "Choose somewhere safer." I took it straight to the office. They kept the paper, asked me more questions, and called my parents. For a few weeks now, the school suddenly cared a lot more about locked doors and visitors. But they never told us who the man was. As far as I know, they never found him. Most people eventually stopped talking about it. By the end of the year, it became one of those stories students told each other when a real substitute walked in. But I never found it funny, because the whole class saw him. The office said no substitute was scheduled, and yet somehow the paper I wrote in that classroom ended up in my locker the next morning. I still think about that question sometimes. Where do you feel safest? I don't like that question anymore, because someone asked me once, and then they tried to prove me wrong.